Breaking, Ottawa declares Canada's freshwater a public trust. Exports are off the table. Welcome to Canada Next for detailed analysis.
Officials warn exports would create dangerous dependency and harm ecosystems. Sovereignty comes first.
Breaking tonight, something no one thought possible has just happened. The unthinkable is now negotiable. In a stunning move, Donald Trump didn't hint, didn't suggest, he demanded. And the response from Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney? It wasn't diplomatic. It wasn't careful. It was a thunderclap. Washington was left speechless. Ottawa was defiant. And the world is suddenly watching what could become the first North American water sovereignty crisis in history. This is global world news. Stay with us, because what's unfolding right now could change the map, the economy, and the balance of power between two of the world's closest allies. Earlier this week, the province of British Columbia received a shocking notification. The United States government has paused negotiations on the Columbia River Treaty, the very deal that controls how water flows between Canada and the U.S., not postponed. Not delayed. Paused. Officially, Washington says it's reviewing its international engagements. But when you're talking about water, during the worst drought crisis in American history, that phrase means something very different. It means Washington is rethinking who owns the water and who gets to keep it. Then came the words that changed everything. Trump said, quote, "They have millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north, from the snowcaps in Canada, all pouring down. They have essentially a very large faucet. A faucet, not a resource, not an ecosystem. A faucet, something you can just turn on and off." And in that single word, everything shifted. Because this isn't about trade anymore. It's not about tariffs or pipelines or border politics. This is about survival. What we are witnessing is the beginning of a continental standoff over water, the most essential resource on Earth. And for the first time since 1812, the United States and Canada are looking at each other across a line not drawn by ideology or money, but by rivers, lakes, and invisible underground streams that both nations depend on to live. Let's rewind. January 15th, 2025, Phoenix, Arizona. Trump addresses a roaring crowd about water scarcity. He talks about Canada's abundance. He calls it logical cooperation. The crowd cheers. The Canadian embassy responds politely. Standard diplomatic phrasing about environmental stewardship. Nothing unusual. But the calm didn't last. Just weeks later, on February 3rd, Trump raises the stakes. This time, at a press conference, he's far more direct. Arizona, Nevada, California, they're heading toward crisis, he says. Conservation won't solve it. Technology won't solve it. But Canada has more fresh water than it could ever use. Why not share? Within hours, Ottawa fires back. Prime Minister Mark Carney steps up to the podium. No notes, no script. He stares straight into the camera and says, "Canada's water is not a tradable commodity. It is a public trust. Part of our identity, part of our environment. It is not for sale. It will never be for sale." That was it. The door slammed shut, locked, and welded closed for good measure. Across the U.S., from Phoenix to Las Vegas to Los Angeles, people heard Carney's words, and a chilling question began to spread. What happens when the richest, most powerful country in the world runs out of water, and the neighbor next door says no? Faucet 30. To understand the gravity of this, you need to see the bigger picture. Over the past decade, America's Southwest has been drying out. Reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell, once massive blue lifelines, have dropped to record lows. Entire towns have started rationing water. Farms are collapsing. And in the background, the climate keeps getting hotter, the rivers smaller, and the desperation louder. Meanwhile, just across the border, Canada sits on nearly 20% of the world's freshwater reserves. Untouched lakes, glacier-fed rivers, groundwater aquifers the size of nations. And now, those two realities are colliding. Experts have warned about this moment for decades, the so-called blue-gold wars. But few imagined it would start here. between two allies bound by history, trade, and trust. Yet here we are, Washington and Ottawa, quietly but unmistakably, preparing for a resource confrontation. Behind the scenes, U.S. states are already pressuring the federal government to renegotiate cross-border water rights. Some lawmakers are calling it a matter of national security. Canadian officials, meanwhile, are doubling down, proposing constitutional protections for freshwater, effectively banning large-scale exports. And between those two forces lies the Columbia River Basin, one of the most valuable water systems on Earth. And this is where the tension could explode. The Columbia River doesn't just power dams, it powers economies. It irrigates millions of acres, feeds industries, and keeps communities alive from British Columbia down to Oregon. And if that flow gets political, if water becomes leverage, the ripple effects will reach from Wall Street to every kitchen tap on the continent. Now, here's what's really interesting and disturbing. Washington insiders are saying this pause on the Columbia River Treaty isn't just about reviewing policy. It's about rewriting the terms of control. For the first time, the U.S. is openly questioning whether Canada's stewardship model should give way to a shared access model, meaning, we don't want to buy your water. We want to claim it as mutual necessity. And that's what has Ottawa alarmed. Because mutual necessity sounds a lot like strategic interest, and history tells us what happens when nations redefine resources as strategic interests. They fight for them. Now let's talk politics. For Trump, this isn't just about drought. It's about dominance. It's a message to voters that America won't beg for anything. Not oil, not trade, not water. For Carney, it's about sovereignty. His entire political brand is built on defending Canada's environmental and national integrity. Two leaders, two agendas, one rapidly shrinking resource, and no room left to compromise. Environmental scientists are calling this the 21st century oil crisis, only this time, you can't drill more, you can't invent more, and you can't replace it. You either have water or you don't. And as climate patterns shift, the United States, once the breadbasket of the world, is drying out faster than models predicted. So what happens next? Negotiations are frozen. Both governments have hardened their language, and local communities are starting to panic. Some states are pushing for desalination projects, others for interbasin pipelines, even ideas of diverting Alaskan rivers southward. But all of that takes time, and time is exactly what they don't have. Meanwhile, north of the border, Canadians are seeing a different picture, one where American thirst could threaten ecosystems, fisheries, and indigenous lands that depend on natural flow. For them, this isn't a trade issue. It's a question of existence. This story, make no mistake, is no longer about diplomacy. It's about what happens when necessity collides with sovereignty, when the survival of millions depends on rivers that cross borders, and when one side begins to see water not as a blessing, but as a right. Experts say if this dispute escalates, it could redefine international law itself, forcing new treaties on how countries share natural resources in a warming world. Others warn that if Washington pushes too hard, it could fracture the very alliance that underpins North American stability. And that brings us here, to this moment, where drought, politics, and power have created a perfect storm, a storm that could decide who controls the future of water on this continent. The question is no longer if this becomes a crisis, it's how soon. Because as the rivers shrink and tempers rise, one reality becomes impossible to ignore. You can negotiate trade. You can negotiate borders. But you can't negotiate thirst. And so, as America searches for solutions and Canada stands its ground, the world watches, knowing that this fight isn't just about two nations. It's a preview of what's coming for all of us, a global struggle for the most precious resource on Earth. Stay with Global World News, because this isn't just politics. This is survival, and the story is only just beginning.